Hello and welcome back to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I am your host, as always, Josh Carr, and we're back again. It's the second episode of Series 5, and obviously you know by now it's Series 5 that I'm never alone. I always have a wonderful guest with me, and this week is no different, and we've got an amazing guest for you that I know a lot of people are very excited for me to talk to. It's the writer of Series 4's The Fires of Pompeii and Torchwood Sleeper, and much, much more in the Doctor Who universe. It's the ever wonderful James Moran. How are you?
Hello, thank you. I can't live up to that introduction, blimey.
Of course you can. Of course you can. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. A lot of people were very, very, very excited. I think a lot of people are excited to hear about your time working around the show. What I'll do is I'll start at the beginning like I always do. Doctor Who, for you, what are your earliest memories? Where did Doctor Who start for you? More as a fan, really.
Just forever, literally as long as I can remember. It's the first thing I remember watching. I clearly must have been watching it from the age of 2 or 3 because I don't remember when I first started. My first actual memory of sitting down to watch the show is the first episode of City of Death, and being in my living room and that cliffhanger ending where he pulls his mask off for no reason at all. Other than to show the audience his big spaghetti face, and I just vividly remember. I think I just stood up for the whole time. I think I just used to stand up watching it because I just didn't want to move and I wanted to catch everything. And just standing there, and then that cliffhanger ending and the scream, and my mother saying something like, "Oh my god," because she thought it was absolutely ridiculous. But she didn't stop me watching it. She would always call me in when it was on. So that's the first one I can remember. But I know I'd been watching it before then because it wasn't my memory of that moment wasn't me thinking, "What is this show?" I was clearly familiar with it and I knew about it. So that's my earliest memory. So I couldn't tell you what the first one I actually saw was. But that's
no.
my
But I mean, City
time.
of Death is a great one to have as you know, your first memory, because it could have very easily been some of the more obscure ones of that later Tom era. There's a few wild ones in there. One that my last guest Josh Snares put in, which was the Horns of Nyman, a wild ride for everyone involved. So obviously after City of Death, I assume like a lot of us, you were sort of hooked from there on in. Were you quite an intense fan in terms of, collecting lots of books and watching every episode religiously, or were you more of a casual for a while?
No, you never watch anything casually, particularly Doctor Who. No, I was absolutely obsessed with it. I would never miss an episode. I would even when the show was finished, I would sit and watch all of the end credits and try and read all the names really quickly to see what all the job titles were and whatever. Because sometimes the job titles were more exotic than the alien names. Like Vision Mixer and all that kind of thing.
They sound a bit like Doctor Who villains. I can see the Vision Mixer.
I will mix your vision, Doctor. And my mother was just like, she knew the show was finished, and she's like, I want to change the channel now and to get to what I'm watching. And I'm like, no, I need to watch the end credits. It's very important, which I still do. I'm still sort of fascinated by the end credits of things. I don't know why I did that. I just. I was an odd kid. I didn't have many. And don't forget, it wasn't cool to watch Doctor Who back then. It wasn't like you'd run into school the next day and go, "Hey everyone, what did everyone think of Doctor Who?" I had one friend who didn't go to my school who liked Doctor Who, and you didn't go to school and talk about Doctor Who. You didn't go to school and play Doctor Who in the playground. If you liked Doctor Who, you were a weird kid, so you just tended to not talk about it. And sort of I pretended to like football for years and collected Panini albums. I do like it now, but I didn't as a kid. But I just pretended.
I was exactly the same. That's
something
very
to
strange,
talk about.
isn't it? I was
not at
I
all.
was exactly the same. I was, to be fair, I grew up in an era where Doctor Who had probably one of its coolest times, where it was probably its most popular. But Series 1, Series 2, it was still sort of growing with Chris and David, and then it really sort of started ramping up. But when it first started, there was sort of the element of it's not the coolest thing to be an intense fan of, and going to school with my Doctor Who backpack, didn't endear me to a massive group of people. But I was very much the same in terms of I like football now, but I very much pretended to like it when I was younger, despite hating it completely. I'm intrigued as well as to, obviously you mentioned that you were very obsessed with the end credits and sort of the seeing what people were doing behind the scenes. Is that what you think led you to become a writer? Was that something that helped you along that path?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly part of that, because I was already writing stories in my spare time, just not huge stories because I was a kid, but just little sort of one page epics. So it just sort of fed into that, and I would watch out and see who the writers were. So I knew that if it was Terry Nation or Terrance Dicks, I knew that there were probably going to be some Daleks, or if not, there would at least be lots of explosions. So I always looked forward to those ones, because I thought, okay, here we go, we're going to get some big effects here, some excitement and some shouting, and then I would sort of look out for the Target books in the shops, and I would remember that, because they would do some of the books, and I remember their names, and lots of the TV writers would do the books, so I'd watch out for those, and just trying to, because this was back in the 70s, which feels like 1,000 years ago. There was no internet. You couldn't afford to just go to bookshops and buy lots of books. You had to kind of go to the library or second-hand shops, because you just couldn't afford to do that. And there weren't videos of the shows. There weren't DVDs. If you missed something, that was it, and you sort of expected to never ever see it again. So when they started repeating the Patrick Troughton years, while I was watching the Tom Baker years, no, it was the Peter Davison years. They were doing that. I would watch the current show, and then on a different day they would show old repeats of the Patrick Troughton stories. So there was a whole sort of extra world of stuff that I was getting to see, and then the books were kind of sometimes the only way of getting to experience a story that hadn't been on TV, or hadn't been on TV for a long time, or was lost. And I didn't even know there were lost stories. I just assumed that maybe one day they would repeat them. Didn't realise that some of them, it would never ever happen. So I was just completely obsessed, and I was one of my other early memories is when I was 4 years old and writing a story in class, and the teacher read it out in front of everyone, made me stand on a chair and read it out to the class, and everyone laughed and clapped. Because we this is my first year at primary school. We would have a thing called story time, which I think was, looking back now, I think it was the teacher gets a quiet half an hour time. Because it was like, right, so I want you to draw and write your story. So everybody would, every single week, everyone would draw a little house, with the chimney and the smoke coming out, and the trees and people waving, and then underneath would write, "This is a house." And for a long time that was sort of enough, and after a while it was like, okay, it's story time, and I was like, oh, we're drawing the house again, writing the house story, that's gripping, amazing. So I got bored of that, so I just filled a whole sheet of paper, something like 6 lines. It wasn't like an A4 mammoth thing, but I just filled the whole paper with a story, and the teacher was very, very surprised and thought it was fun, and read it out, and I got applause, I got laughs, and I just, it's such a vivid memory. I distinctly remember thinking, this is cool, I like this is nice. Wouldn't it be fun if I could do this? And I knew that people wrote books, and I sort of knew people wrote TV and films, but TV and films, that was just like, don't even think about that, that's a ridiculous idea. But I thought, I could just do more of this sort of writing, and maybe write a book one day, and maybe I could sort of sit and write books, and that could be my job. But then I thought, but that's probably not going to happen, because people from small towns don't get to do that. But it was just like a little sort of nice pipe dream that I would have one day. Never imagined I would get to write TV or films. Never dreamed that I could possibly get to work on Doctor Who. That was absolute nonsense. But yeah, it was always there. It was always in me, and Doctor Who just sort of helped to bring it out.
Yeah. So what came for? I'm right in saying, if I'm getting my timings right, Torchwood came first before. Yeah, Torchwood Series 2 is before Series 4. So Torchwood, I assume, was that your first piece of Doctor Who writing, or had you done some extended universe stuff before? Because when I was going through your credits, you've got a lot from around that time, around 2007 to 2010. There's quite a bulk of your stuff in the Doctor Who world sort of falls in that time period. But Torchwood, so Sleeper. From Series 2 was your first bit of Doctor Who universe writing, is that right?
Yeah. Well, I'd had an agent for a little bit, and I kind of assumed, like, the accepted wisdom at the time was, this is before, the whole TV renaissance and Netflix and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Before Doctor Who had come back, the standard wisdom was, if you want to get into TV and film, you start off in TV, and you do TV for a bit, and then you work your way up to film. And so I tried to get into TV for ages, and people forget, there was hardly any sci-fi TV on at the time. There were a few there's some American shows, because they don't have a sort of a genre snobbery over there that we do, and have always had and still do. But over here there was very little. There was Doctor Who, and that was it. And now and again they would try and do more genre stuff. But then when I was trying to get into TV in the sort of 2003, 2004, there wasn't even Doctor Who. There was nothing. And now and again they would try and do a genre show, and they wouldn't put any money into it. So it would have no budget, and they wouldn't go to a genre writer. They go to a proper writer who'd written some drama stuff. Usually someone who'd never seen sci-fi and was very snooty about it and thought they were above it all, and then would end up writing the most awful cliched nonsense because they hadn't seen it and they didn't love the genre. And you've got to love it, and you've got to know it. And then it would die a death, and they go, see, it doesn't work. Sci-fi doesn't work. People don't watch it. And they go, no, it doesn't. They don't watch it because you're making terrible TV sci-fi. So I could not get a job in TV. Couldn't get anything at all. People were not buying what I was selling. They were not interested in my shtick. So I ended up spending a year writing a film, which became Severance, because I didn't know how to write films. So it took me a year to fix the terrible early draft that I'd done. And then that, out of the blue, that sold and got made. And then Doctor Who came back. And suddenly everyone was like, TV sci-fi, we got to make TV sci-fi. Everyone loves TV sci-fi. We've always known this. We've always wanted to do, we've always been at war with East Asia. It's just, and suddenly it was everywhere. And then it was like, oh, okay, so now, and then TV sort of had a bit of a boom, a bit of a renaissance. So then I was able to get a meeting with the Torchwood producer and the Torchwood script editor. Series 1 was sort of nearly finished airing, so we just had a meeting about that. And I just said, I was just watching it as a fan, as I was watching Doctor Who as well. I was delighted that Doctor Who came back. I was so happy. And then I was like, there's a spin-off. This is like my childhood dreams. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So I was a fan of the show. We had a chat about what I liked, what I thought worked, what I thought didn't work, what I might want to do. And then they invited me to pitch an episode. So I came up with 3 pitches. They liked the sound of one of them, and I worked that up into an outline. They just asked me to sort of think a little bit more about the story, but I just went and wrote an entire outline for the entire story. And then I came in to meet Chris Chibnall, and Russell and Julie were there as well. And so they sat in on the meeting, and they said, have you thought about what the story might be? And I said, yes, I have. Here's the story. And I just reeled on it. I remember them all, Chris, Russell and Julie and Brian and Richard. They would all just sort of sat around me, just kind of looking at me with amusement. It's like, what is this? And it was because I was so enthusiastic and excited, and I just really wanted to be involved. And I was, I will literally do anything to make this happen. And I was so excited and full of ideas and just ridiculous and silly. So I think that sort of endeared me. I think I just sort of talked them to death, which is not easy to do with people like Russell and Julie. and we laughed and laughed. You always just laugh. Any meeting that Russell's in, you just laugh and laugh and laugh. And then I went off. I went off to write it, and it was just such a blast. It was so much fun. I could not believe that I was getting to do it, and working with Chris and Richard and Russell and Julie and Brian. And it was just an absolute dream. And I did keep dropping lots of hints that I loved Doctor Who and always had, and would kill to work on it. But I kind of thought, I've got a chance here, but it's probably not going to happen.
So, I mean, Sleep is a wonderful episode, by the way. It's a great episode of Torchwood. I rewatched it the other night in preparation, and I've not watched Torchwood for years, but it's weird how after watching Doctor Who steadily for a couple of years, how easy it is to just drop back into all of the sex and swearing and chaos of Torchwood.
It's bonkers. It's such a bonkers show. I love it.
It's a crazy show, and obviously you worked on Children of Earth as well, which is possibly my favourite piece of Doctor Who media that's ever been created. I think it's an incredible series of TV, and you obviously co-wrote with Russell on that. What was that like, working on Children of Earth? Because I mean I remember Torchwood was obviously very popular, but I feel like it was massive when Children of Earth came on. And I mean I don't know how I was watching it, because I mean looking back at how old I was when I mean I was about 12. So I probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch it, but I just told my parents it's a Doctor Who show, and they didn't look into it any further. So I ended up being able to watch it. But phenomenal series of TV is Children of Earth. What was that like to work on?
Oh, blimey! It was because Torchwood changes channel and format every single series, which is it just fits the kind of it fits the show that it has this complete sort of renewal every time, which is just really good fun. It was I had such a great time in series 2, and I felt like this is the best job in the world. And in fact the wrap party of series 2, they sort of rented a room, and we had a party, and there was an ice sculpture. And then they took us all to this kind of local nightclub, and I remember at the time there was like a special VIP area upstairs, and they brought us over to the stairs, and the bouncer was there, saw us coming, and there was an actual velvet rope, and he took the velvet rope aside. I was just like, I'm walking into a cliche. I'm going behind the velvet rope. And then we got up to the top, and we were looking at the balcony. We had our drinks, and I was just like, this is the height of TV making fun. And then literally 5 minutes later, a different bouncer came over and said, sorry, you don't actually have wristbands to be in this area, you have to go back downstairs. And we'd all just burst out laughing, so we were like, that's showbiz. We had our 5 minutes in the sun. It was like, get out of here. Which I couldn't stop laughing. It still makes me laugh. So then series 3 was going to be just a third series of 12, 13 episodes or whatever. And they kept saying, oh yeah, you'll come back to do an episode, don't worry, that's all fine. And they kept saying it, and then it suddenly all went quiet, and I thought, okay, all right, I had my time. I've done lots of other work, and that's fine. I've been on Doctor Who, I've done Spooks, and I've done like every other show in the country. That's okay, I can do something else. And I got a phone call one day from the script head, and he said, "Hi James, plans have changed a bit for series 3." And I was like, "Okay, fair. That's nice of them to phone me and let me know rather than just telling my agent." And he said, "Yeah, it's going to be a different format. It's going to be like a one story, a big long event stripped across a week, just 5 episodes. There's only going to be 3 writers on it." And I went, "Okay, well, fair enough." And he said, "And you're going to be one of them." And I was like, "What? Really? There's like 20 other writers that I can think of off the top of my head who would be better for this, and you would get more out of." But again, I think it was because I was enthusiastic, I was full of ideas, I was good to work with, and I'm nice to work with, and I am fast. I can write really, really fast. I can knock out drafts really quick, and do I can do 5 drafts when most writers will have done one or two.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, being easy to work with, and they, when you get the Doctor Who job, they tell you, well, this is back then when Russell was in charge. I guess again now, they tell you that it'll be your episode, you will own it, you'll write it. But then there will come a point where Russell will do his polish. It might be a tiny polish, it might be a huge polish. You won't know, but he won't take credit, and it'll still be your episode. That's the deal. A lot of big writers have said no to that because they're not up for it, and that's fair enough. He said, but if you want to do it, then that's the condition. And I was just like, that's absolutely fine. I mean, how could you complain about that, especially a new writer like me? So I think just that sort of attitude of like, okay, you have some talent, and you're quick, and you're easy to work with, and you're flexible, and you're not going to get your nose bent out of shape if we have to change stuff on the fly. You're not going to get annoyed about it. And that goes a long way, I think. I think there are a lot of better writers than me who probably wouldn't have all the other things. So it's kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like you got a deck of cards, and I've got a few good cards and one okay card, and that sort of gets you further along.
Yeah.
So I think that was sort of a big part of it. And they knew that I would come up with lots of ideas. So that was the first session was 2 days in a conference room with me, Russell, John Fay, the other writer, Julie Gardner, Brian Minchin, script head, Peter, the producer, and Eros, the director. Unusually, having us all in the room for the 2 day brainstorm, and Russell had a basic idea and setup and some of the big sort of moments he wanted to hit. And we just sat and brainstormed and sort of worked out the whole storyline, which changed obviously, but we just kind of sat there and just brainstormed and had fun and thought up cool stuff and scary stuff and exciting stuff around that, and then it got sort of put into rough episode order, and then we got assigned our episodes, so we didn't know which ones we'd be writing ahead of time, which I think is better, because then you're not kind of like, I'll save my ideas for my episode. You're all just trying to sort of make the whole show better. And you feel more of an ownership over it. So it was just going to be my episode, and it was up until a certain point. I think I did 4 drafts or so, and then after that, they said, okay, we're getting close to production time. Russell's going to take it for his polish, and then it ended up being a bit of a bigger rewrite. And then they said, okay, it's going to be a shared credit. Do you want to have a look at the episode just in case you're not okay with that? And you can't really complain that one of our greatest writers is going over your stuff and making it better. It's like who's gonna complain about that? And I watched it and I was like, he has done this is a big rewrite, and so I had nothing to complain about there. So it wasn't like we were sitting in a room together to sort of co-writing it. It was like just like on Doctor Who, I did my bit up to a point, and then he took over. But even then, they still kind of kept me on and kept me involved, and I went to the tone meeting, the read through. I went to visit the set, and it was all like, this is your episode, this is your episode. So it is very writer friendly, even when you do get rewritten and you're sharing the credit, they still kind of treat you really, really well. It's one of the both Torchwoods and Doctor Who. I think it's the best I've been treated on pretty much any project. It's just you are so looked after.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Obviously, you mentioned it there. Let's wind back a bit, because obviously sandwiched in between those two, you got to do an episode of Doctor Who, which is I think I remember that. It's
that show. Is it still on?
Yeah. So the Fires of Pompeii, which has always been a favourite of mine, I must say. I've got 2 versions of it now on my shelf. I've got the Target novel just there, and I've got Series 4 just there. So I love it. I love the Fires of Pompeii. how did that come about? And was there much difference in terms of the writing and pitching process than there was with Torchwood? Was it
Oh
very
yeah,
different? Was it more intense?
very
Or?
very very different. A bit more intense just because of the pressure of it being such a huge show. But they don't put any of that pressure on you. It's just you put it on yourself. Because Torchwood at the time, I think it was getting like, I think series two was maybe getting like 3 million or something. What was that? Yeah, I think it was like 2 or 3 million viewers, which to me, I was like, that's a huge amount of people watching something I've written all at the same time. That's terrifying. But then when it's Doctor Who, at the time, it was getting like 9, 10, 11 million people watching it, and that was that messes with your head. Yeah, it was towards the end of the Torchwood process. It was either the read through or the tone meeting. I was going to Cardiff for, and I was due in at sort of 9 o'clock, and they said, could you come in an hour earlier? Could you get an earlier train? Well, you're treated so well. They organise all your trains for you, and they pay for everything, and you get taxied there and back. A lot other shows I won't mention. It's not, because they I guess they don't. I'm trying to be kind. Maybe they don't have as much of a sort of a big production behind them. But other shows, it's just like, get yourself here,
Yeah.
Maybe because it was in Cardiff, so you had to get a train.
It's a way away.
But yeah, they were just like, would you mind coming in an hour earlier for a secret meeting before the Torchwood tone meeting or scores or read through, whichever one it was. And I was like, yes, I can do that. And I immediately thought, this must be for Doctor Who. It's got to be for Doctor Who. I think series 3 was sort of halfway through airing at the time, and I thought, it's got to be for Doctor Who, unless it's because we haven't even started shooting Torchwood yet. This is just the read through with the tone meeting, so it can't be for the next series of Torchwood because we're still making this one. So I thought, it's got to be for Doctor Who. I literally have mentioned Doctor Who in every single meeting and how much I wanted to work on it. So if it isn't Doctor Who and they said come in for a secret meeting, that'd be really cruel. That would be really, really cruel.
It would be quite
mean.
mean.
To me.
Yeah.
It'd be funny for them, but it would be really awful. And I thought, and I had a week to sort of second guess myself, and I thought, well, maybe it's a different, maybe it's another spin-off, maybe it's a different show, which they'd have to keep secret. Which would be great, which would be amazing if I was getting to do an episode of a different secret show. That would be brilliant, but I would still kind of think, I hope it's not Doctor Who. So I got in for the meeting, and there's Russell, Julie, and Brian, and I was just like, hey guys, and they're like, hey, how are you? Blah, 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 how's your journey? And I was like, yeah, it was great. And then I remembered Russell just went, oh, James Moran, do you want to write an episode of Doctor Who? And they knew I knew, and I knew that they knew that I knew, and I just went, yes, I would. What do I have to do? I'll do anything. Again, I think this is probably why I got several jobs at the time. Yeah, I'll do it. What do you want? Who do you want me to kill? And they said, great. We thought so. Basically, we're planning series 4. It's going to be the big Pompeii. We're going to do an episode in Pompeii. We've figured out how to do. We want to do it in series 1. We figured out how to do it now. We've got some sets in Rome from the TV show Rome we can use, so we can do 2 days of those filming outside on those sets. We don't have to build those sets, so that the costs will sort of balance out, so that we'll build a villa here for the Roman family to live in, and we can use Cardiff countryside, the Wales countryside for outside of Vesuvius. It'll be the most expensive one we've done so far because there's going to be lots of volcano effects.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, and I was like, well, you're planning all the volcano effects. You're building the villa. You've got sets picked out from the TV show Rome to use, and I was like, so in my head I was like, well, so surely there's a storyline, and they were like, don't know what the story is. Go and come up with something and bring an outline back next week. But yeah, we want a Roman family to see everything through their eyes, because you can't have 20,000 people in the story, and that's why we're building the villa right now. We want some kind of fire monsters, good or bad, don't know, up to you, whatever.
Yeah.
And when the eruption happens, we want some kind of spaceship coming out in the lava, whether it's a ship or an escape pod or something.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, and you'll need to use X amount of pages on these Rome sets because we've only got 2 days to film there. X amount of pages in the villa to balance out the cost of the expensive stuff, and you get X amount of pages in the Wales countryside to double for Vesuvius.
Yeah.
We've got some caves as well, and we'll send you a load of books about Pompeii and a couple of Asterix books as well for jokes. Oh, and it was in that meeting. He said, I want the Cambridge Latin course family in there because he did them when he was a kid, and he was always upset that they just got killed, and he wanted to put them in. And I can't remember if he said you wanted to keep them alive or not. I don't know, but it was probably implied.
Yeah.
He said, and we'll send you that book as well. So so come back next week with an outline. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I can do that.
So it's a lot of faith to put in a writer when you've arranged a lot of those things and then saying you build the story around it. I mean, it's nice to hear that they had that much faith. And it's like you think of the episode. Obviously, it's fantastic all the way through, but like the idea that one of the main notes was the spaceship coming out of the volcano, I think is quite a strange one. I assume when they've got a vision in their head,
yeah. He's a very visual and emotional writer. So it's all sort of heart and he gets these images and names. He can just pluck names out of the air. He can just think of the perfect name for a character. I'm terrible at names, so I'm so jealous.
So coming up with the outline, because obviously the like you said, the family was mentioned as quite a key thing. And I was rewatching it the other day because I have my girlfriend is not a massive Doctor Who fan, and she has a very select few episodes of Doctor Who that she will watch that she enjoys, and she's got a lot of one of her big key elements is I don't want any silly monsters in it. And I'm like, well, what? That takes out like 85% of Doctor Who.
Are you aware of what show you're watching?
Exactly. So, but Fires of Pompeii has always been near the top of her list. She loves it. And we were rewatching it the other day, and I was about to say this, but she mentioned as well about the family dynamic and how modern it is. And seeing sort of quite a modern family dynamic in that period setting was really, really fun. Is that, and it sort of is like the basis of the episode, like the villa's sort of the hub, and a lot of the drama revolves around the family. I assume you sort of took that note and ran with it. So what was the basis of the family, and where did those characters sort of spring from?
Honestly, a lot of the basis was knowing I had to have quite a lot of pages in that villa. So it's having these little sort of puzzle pieces that you had to sort of fit in. It actually helps in a way, because if they in that meeting had said, do you want to do a Doctor Who episode? Right, come up with an idea and come back to us. I don't know if I'd have. And I did have some ideas ready just in case they want me to pitch there and then, but I think I would have had a lot more trouble with it, because you can go anywhere and do anything, which is mad. So it was just, I think part of it was I'm not gonna, I don't want to write the family sort of talking in kind of sort of classical kind of Latin structured language. Sort of fake Shakespearean Latin-y ancient times oldie worldy stuff. Partly because I don't want to do it, partly because it would sound terrible and it would just be stilted and weird. And a big part of the show is, we're seeing stuff that we'd never get to see through our sort of eyes. And also I think part of that came from the TARDIS translation circuits, where, and I kind of go into this a bit more in the Target novelisation, that it's not that there's a Cockney market trader in ancient Pompeii. It's that he is a working class market trader in that region of Pompeii. So the TARDIS translation circuits, it translates what he's saying, but it puts it in the sort of a vernacular that you would be familiar with, so
Yeah.
so that you know what kind of things he's saying. It translates it into sort of Cockney rhyming slang and that kind of thing.
Love that addition. When I read it in the Target novel, I was like, that's a really good way of explaining it, and a good way of viewing it is having that sort of Cockney market trader.
Yeah,
I love that addition.
That was my sort of understanding of how it worked, or I don't know if that was already there, or if it was just something I kind of extrapolated, because I overthink everything in life and in writing, and I like to, especially if it's science fiction, I like to kind of overthink how things work and that it makes sort of logical sense. So I really kind of overthought that, and I thought, well, that's probably what the circuits would do. If you hear him sounding like a Cockney market trader saying apples and pears and lovely jubbly, then that's not what he's saying in ancient Latin. But if you were there at the time and you spoke ancient Latin, it would be the equivalent of that, you know.
Yeah.
It'd be that would be the sort of the local kind of jokes of the era, which is why Lucius sounds more sort of posh and kind of RP and kind of snooty, and the family just sound more sort of down to earth and, oh, get off it, Dad, and all this kind of thing. Because that's the sort of dynamic they had, but it's translating it into a version that makes sense for your modern TARDIS ears, so to speak.
Yeah, and as well, I think that obviously the other key thing about the episode is sort of the morality of time travel, which comes into it, which I think obviously we had episodes that touched on it in the early revival. Sort of with Father's Day, you get sort of a smaller scale version of what happens if you change time. This is, I'd say, probably one of the first times where they do it on a massive scale, and you know, a lot of it harkens back to sort of the Aztecs when we first have these kinds of conversations. Was that always in your mind, your direction of there's an interesting tale to tell here of what happens if you have the opportunity to save all of these people, but there's no way of saving them?
In a way, I remember in sort of early conversations, Russell did say about the kind of the fixed point in time thing, and he mentioned those kind of first Doctor conversations, and he was like, there are some things that you can't change, and some things that you can, just to sort of explain why we're not going to change the history of Pompeii. And then that became a kind of a problem to solve with the story, because it's like, okay, well, the Doctor's gone back to ancient Pompeii, the volcano's going to explode, and it's like, what's the story? The Doctor goes and saves people and stops bad things happening, but this is it's a fixed point in time in the Doctor universe, but in the real world this really happened, and we can't make it unhappen. We can't have the story that I've stopped the eruption in Pompeii and everyone's saved, and now Pompeii is a thriving city in the modern world, because that would just be in such bad taste. It would be so poor taste. And also just kind of the legacy of the show with the historical adventures. It's kind of like, you know, obviously there weren't aliens in Pompeii, well, that we know of. We have a duty to the kids watching to kind of try and have some historical accuracy as much as possible. You know, we can't just say it didn't happen, because that would just be awful. And so part of the trickiness was trying to work out what the story is, given that he can actually stop this from happening, and how do we sort of honor all those people that lived and died, you know, people who we can go and look at them right now. They are preserved in time. They're, well, not them specifically, but they're inverse images in plastercast form. So that was kind of the hard bit. And then I do this in most of my Doctor Who stuff. I always kind of go back to Genesis of the Daleks, you know, and because it's such a tortuous moment where someone has to make a terrible choice, and both options are bad. And then it was like, what if the eruption isn't going to happen because of the aliens, and the Doctor has to make it happen to save the whole planet? So he has to do it to save the planet, and that's what he has to do, and that's the mission. And then everything sort of, once that sort of nugget kind of came in, then that was everything sort of spiraled out from that, because that's sort of the ending. It's all right, now I can work back from that. And also it's Donna's first proper trip in the TARDIS. I just thought that awful moment where he has to press down the lever. And wouldn't it be nice if she just puts her hand on his, so they're both doing it, so it's not just him. So yeah, so those two moments, it's like, oh, so once you've got that to build to at the end, it's like, well, everything else is just you know how to get there, and then you can have lots of fun in the first half, because you kind of have to, because it gets quite dark, so you have to have lots of fun and jokes. And Mary Poppins references.
I noticed the Mary Poppins reference. Mary Poppins is my favourite film of all time, and it's
a banger.
Me and my girlfriend just pointed in Mary Poppins. Love that.
Yeah. It's a shameless steal.
Loved it. I'm glad to get confirmation of that. I'm very, very glad. Of course it is. We'll move on. We'll have a very, very quick break, and then when we come back, we're gonna fly through some features. So we'll see you in a moment. Hello, and we are back. You are still listening to Who Knew. I'm still your host, Josh Carr, and I'm still here with James Moran. Of course, we've had a wonderful time chatting so far, but now it's time to get to the business of the DVD collection.
By the power of Grayskull.
The Unicorn and the Wasp, or Love and Monsters?
Which one do you think I'll prefer?
No, I mean, which one do you want to watch first?
You are pulling my leg.
So, the DVD collection, for those of you who may not have listened before, is a collection of quintessential Doctor Who stories that are submitted by my wonderful guests, and get to remain in the DVD collection as sort of a fun gathering of wonderful and sometimes not as wonderful stories as well. That's the joy of the DVD collection, is that anything can make its way in here, as we learnt last week with the Horns of Nyman. So, James, I am very, very excited to hear, what would you like to submit to the DVD collection?
I am going to, it was a no-brainer for me, it's going to be The Abominable Snowmen, which I have
wonderful
on
pick.
Blu-ray, for a couple of reasons. One which will probably surprise you. When I was a kid and there was very little ways of finding stories that you hadn't seen, you just had to hope they might get repeated. Obviously, I would sort of disappear into the Target novels, find them in the library or secondhand shops. And The Abominable Snowmen was one of those Target novels that I don't know why, but that was the one out of all of them that I was most obsessed with, and I reread that more than any other. I don't know why. I don't know what there was about it. I loved Patrick Troughton because I was watching his repeats, so I knew I loved his Doctor. There was just something about the atmosphere, the storyline, the Yetis. It was just so evocative, and I just kept trying to picture it, and I just couldn't imagine what it would look like. And I always hoped that it would get repeated when they were showing all the Patrick Troughton stories, but I didn't realise at the time that it was a lost story. I had no idea. So when I got older and I started, getting a bit more into finding stuff out, and realised that it was a missing story and that I would never get to see it. And it was heartbreaking. And there were so many other stories I would never get to see. It just wouldn't happen. And they have found some of those stories since I discovered that. But that one, it was just gone. It was completely unavailable. So when they announced that they were animating it, and you could watch it in black and white or color, and they were gonna completely restore the elements that the stuff that they had of it, and then fill in all the rest of it. It was an absolute dream come true. So I pre-ordered the Blu-ray. I got it on the day of release, and I haven't watched it. I have not watched it. I haven't even taken the plastic off. I got the steelbook. Haven't taken the plastic off. Not because I don't want to, but because I'm saving it. I am saving it. I've waited so long to see it.
I do a very similar thing. I have like a list of like classic films that I should have watched years ago, that I know that I will most likely love, that I don't watch on purpose, because I wanna always have something back. That's wonderful. I mean, it's not often where we get someone submit something to the DVD collection where I've seen it and they haven't. But I actually watched the animation. I managed to get to the BFI to watch it last year when they did the BFI screening, which was an enormous amount of fun. It was so fun, and I'd never had any experience of the story. Everything I knew from it was sort of just hangover from the Web of Fear and stuff like that, and all the other bits of media that mention it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, when you do crack it open, just to put your mind at ease, the animation is wonderful. It's one of my favourites. So it's one of the best animations they've done. But yeah, the Abominable Snowmen is a wonderful pick. I'm very, very glad that it's in, because we don't have a lot of Pat in here. As well, because so many of his stories are missing. I think it's probably one of the most inaccessible eras of the show, really. So we don't get many stories from Pat. I think this might be the second, and I think the first one was Web of Fear. So it's great to see another
which I also haven't seen yet. That's another one that I've been dying to see. I bought the collector's version of it immediately, and I still haven't even opened it yet.
It'll make a great two-parter.
Exactly, yeah. Cause I do want to watch them both, but I've just been saving them, not because I don't want to, because I'm worried. I know I'm not worried at all. It's just I've waited so long, and they've been completely lost forever. And I've read that tiny book. I must have read it about 20 times, so I know I'm going to love it. I know the story, but I know I'm going to love it. And well, I'm just kind of like I finally got this thing that I can watch, and I'm just like, well, I'm just gonna wait and treat myself and just wait for the right moment. I guess maybe a day where I can just watch them both all the way through, one after the other, uninterrupted. I'm so looking forward to that. I really am.
Oh well, you'll have to let us know what you think. You'll have to let us know, and I'll give an update whenever you watch it. We'll mention it on the podcast. So that's it. The Abominable Snowmen is in the DVD collection. So now it's time to go on over to somewhere probably as cold as Tibet. It's the wonderful realm of bloody Twitter.
For God's sake! Bloody Twitter!
So we've got some questions. We'll fly through a few of these because we've got some great questions. The first one is from Dom at Dom to Who. With 2 O's on the end on Twitter. It's a great name. It's a good name, isn't it? Dom has said, do you have any advice for aspiring writers? Alternatively, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received? So I thought I'd give you both.
Wow, the worst advice. Well, there's a lot of terrible advice on Twitter from people who haven't written anything, who seem to be the loudest voices online, just insisting what the rules are. There's a lot of terrible advice. I would just ignore it, completely ignore it, because I did this when I was starting out. I was reading every sort of advice that I could find, and reading all the books you could get, and it didn't help. It just didn't help at all. It just kind of made me think, I've got to try and remember all these rules and all this advice, and then I will write a good script. And that's not what happens. What happens is that you just start feeling pressured and trying to remember what all these these gurus have said, most of whom have never written anything in their life. I think there was one. I don't want to slag off and name names, but there was one where the guy had written. It's always a guy. The guy had written his own script, and he started quoting it in the book as an example of the correct things to do in scripts. And that was the moment that stopped. That was the last one I read, and I stopped, and I was reading it. I was going, this is terrible. This is a terrible script. It opened with a newsreader giving exposition about what had happened previously in the story before the film started. And even I knew then, I was like, that's not very good. That's rubbish. You're just telling me what's happened off screen, in a really stilted way, and I looked him up online. I was like, he's not had anything made. He's not written anything. Why am I listening to this guy? I was like, well, I've not had anything made, but even so, So I think if you think of an idea and then an idea that excites you, and you can get ideas from any ideas are not the difficult part. Ideas are the easy bit. Ideas are everywhere. You can think of an idea. The difficult bit is then turning that into something. So, an idea can just be like, what if my next door neighbor was a serial killer? That's, and that's not a story. That's just an idea. It's not a good idea. It's not a bad idea. But the brainstorm is then when you think, well, what if he was a serial killer? What would happen? Would I hear anything? Would I suspect something? Would if I looked over the guard? And then just start thinking about all the things that might happen in real life if that unbelievable thing was true, and then start thinking about all the stuff that can spiral out from it. And you're not trying to outline it. You're not trying to think of a story. You're just thinking of all the kind of the things that might happen and might be related to it. And then gradually, as you're doing that, you will start figuring out, some of these things kind of go together. This thing that I've just thought of feels like it could be part of the ending, or this feels like this is how the thing could open, the story could open, and you will start seeing a kind of a rough shape to the storyline, and then you can start filling in your gap. And if you're just thinking about characters and sort of and treating them honestly and being emotionally honest with them and thinking, what would this person actually do in this situation if this was real? What would I do in this situation? What would I like to think I would do if I was being brave? What would I probably do if I was being cowardly? And just treat the characters honestly and emotionally, and they will kind of guide you along. And the big secret is every story has the same structure, and that if you're treating the characters realistically and believably, and letting them do what they would do in the real world, then your story will start kind of coming into line and falling into shape, and it will be a character sort of starts off in one situation, ends up going on an adventure, good or bad, and then it is resolved somehow, and stories are all pretty much the same. There's a great Kurt Vonnegut video online where he's talking about the shapes of stories. And he said it's the best story is guy is living his life, gets into trouble, gets out of it again, and he's like, people love that story. And it's and that's most stories, and there are different versions. If you find the I'll find the link and I'll send it.
I'll put it in the description if you
it's like a little 5-minute lecture where he has a blackboard and he shows the shapes of different stories, and it's really funny. And the big secret is they all have the same structure in the end. I like to try and sort of demystify it, and people talk about there's the 3-act structure, there's the 5-act structure, there's the 7-sequence structure, there's the 9-story circle diamond structure, there's the inverse Doppler Moebius strip structure, and it's like every story has a beginning and a middle and an end, and that's what people have been selling books on for years. I do go on about this quite a lot because it really annoys me when people sort of insist on all these rules. And it's like, look, just think of a fun idea, think of what you'd like to see, and just try and treat it honestly and realistically, and just put in stuff you'd like to see, and it will be good. But I read lots of scripts. There's tons of scripts online for free. There's TV scripts, there's film scripts. Just write as much as you can, and you will get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wonderful advice. Thank you for that. The next question, I'm sort of going to merge two questions together because two dear friends of the show asked very similar questions. It was Sam Davis at Dread_Davis on Twitter, and Jack from An Awful Lot of Running Podcast at An_Awful_Jack on Twitter. They basically both were asking about how you feel about the sort of the influence of Fires of Pompeii on later Doctor Who, because I'm struggling to think of a story, especially in the revival, that has had so many ramifications and so much influence on later stories. Like the ones that they mentioned were the Time Lord Victorious, obviously Waters of Mars, sort of even riffing on the title slightly, and then all the way up to Series 9 with the girl who died, and obviously the bringing back Peter Capaldi from your story as well, and even that, the behind the scenes you've got a doctor and a companion both in the episode itself. How do you feel about that, looking back, about how much it's sort of cropped up again in Doctor Who history?
It is bonkers. I mean, it's obviously completely unintentional. It's like nobody, not even Russell would have planned for that to happen later on. Nobody expected any of that to happen. It's just been a complete surprise. I think a lot of it is, they make great stuff, which is going to have ramifications for later things. So it's got every episode becomes part of Doctor Who history and canon, the dreaded word, to draw on for later stories. So lots of stories are gonna affect future stories in some way, and they cast the show really, really well. Andy Pryor is a genius, and that's why you get someone with about 3 lines popping up in the background with funny face paint turns out to be the amazing, all-conquering global superstar Karen Gillan, who was, she wasn't an extra. She had a speaking part, but it wasn't a huge part in the story, and nobody could have predicted, because there were lots of other speaking parts in that. People who didn't then go on to become global superstars, or Doctor Who companions. It's bizarre. I remember when they were about to announce who became Peter Capaldi, and every time they do this, everyone I know messages me, emails and texts. It's like, do you know who it is? Do you know who it is? And I'm like, no, I don't, because why would they tell me? And if they did, why would I then just tell you to go and tell everyone else? They're very good at keeping things quiet. If you don't need to know, they don't tell you. Even if you're working on the show, they don't. There's stuff in my Pompeii episode that Russell put in that I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't need to know, so they didn't tell me. I didn't know what "she is returning" meant. I didn't know what "something on your back" meant. I had no idea, because I didn't need to know, so it didn't matter. So so they always message me and go, "Oh, who is it? Who is it?" I don't know. But that time I said, I don't know who it is, but I can tell you it will not be Peter Capaldi. It absolutely will not be Peter Capaldi. I can tell you that for a fact. And then literally half an hour later, it was Peter Capaldi. I was like, well, I guess you can stop asking. You clearly don't know anything.
You obviously do not have the insider knowledge. Yeah, I do remember Peter's name sort of flying around just before that, like within a day or so, which I think seems to happen every time. Like it's always there's always an unexpected name about a day before. I remember it happening with Jodie Whittaker as well, and everyone goes, no, not a chance.
Don't be ridiculous.
It's always them. It's always that person. So always keep an eye out about 24
always
hours
that random name and Chris Marshall. Poor
Poor
Chris Marshall must be thinking, why have I not been asked? He must be really upset every time it comes around.
Yeah,
like, nope, it's not me
100%.
Again.
Yeah, the only time we didn't get that was with Shooty, because it just came out of nowhere. I was just lounging around the house on a Sunday and suddenly there's a new Doctor. It just sort of jumped out of nowhere.
It's been lots of surpririsers, and they've been much better at keeping things. And Russell was always good at keeping things quiet. They ran a very tight ship. Because I remember back in the early days, I think this is public knowledge. I'm sure I've told the story. I'm sure they've told the story. When they were making the first reboot series, revival series. Julie had just got the script for Dalek, and she was reading it on the train, and someone on the train recognised her and snuck up behind her and sort of looked over the top of the back of her chair and was taking pictures of the script over her shoulder. And then she got off the train back in London or in Cardiff, and someone went, "The script's online, what's going on?" And she was like, "What?" And they put stuff online about the script, which is just so. I think ever since then, the Russell and Julie team have just been they lock stuff down tight. They really do. They told me that. I remember I was writing the outline on my way back from Cardiff, and I remember I was so paranoid about people looking over my shoulder on the train. So when I was typing the outline, I didn't write the Doctor and the TARDIS. I wrote the Dave and the Carr. So I said the Dave arrives in the car, so that I could do a search and replace late when I got home. Because I was like, if someone looks over my shoulder, I don't want to give the game away. I don't want to be the one who gives the game away.
Yeah, it'd be fun if you missed changing one and it somehow snuck into an episode. Donna, we've got to get back to the car.
All right, Dave.
Last question is from, again, another friend of the show, Ben from the Vacuum of Comments YouTube channel, at Vacuum Comments on Twitter. Ben simply said, how much fun did you have writing Ianto as sassy as possible in Sleeper?
Oh, tons of fun. Because
he's a great character, isn't he?
He's amazing, and also he's such a great actor. And I'd seen the first series, and so I knew this guy can do funny. He can do deadpan funny, which is really hard, and that's the kind of thing that I really like to write. So I was just throwing stuff in. Maybe half of this will get through, and maybe it'll be in the background. But he just really ran with it. And he's so much fun. He's so good. And he really, really makes me laugh.
Yeah, he earned the shrine. He definitely earned the shrine.
Really did. Sadly, he's just so desperately ugly. It's just, I think that's held him back for so many years. Just so unattractive.
Another thing that I want to mention about Sleeper, just from when I rewatched it, was one of my favourite lines in the history of the Doctor Who universe ever, which has to be, "Oi, fuck flap, get back in that truck or I'll shove it up your arse." That is the idea that happens in the same universe as some of the warmest, fluffiest Doctor Who stories we've had. Just
most
fills
people
me with
wouldn't
joy.
be proud of that. They'd be ashamed. I am very proud of that.
You should be proud of that. I love fuck flap is now going to be part of my insult arsenal. 100%.
Well, I put it in the very first tray. It's supposed to be fuck flaps, but I think I don't know if he just don't hear it on because it just sounds like fuck flap. But I put it in and I was like, I just put it in for a laugh, and I was like, some rowdy Welsh driver is going to say something like that, and I just always loved that expression, and I thought, this won't get past the first draft, and it just kept staying in each time, and I found out later that every time they got a new draft, they were like, is fuck flap still in there? Is it still there? Oh, the fuck flap's line. Oh, we love that, and even they were like, yeah, that's never going to make it to screen, but and it just kept staying.
Oh, good. I'm glad it
stayed.
stayed.
And I believe I think it's the first fuck flaps on the BBC. So that's my.
And I hope it's not the last. I hope it's not the last. So, well, that was bloody Twitter. Thank you everyone for your questions. We had a few more, but we can't answer them all. But thank you for sending your questions in. We're coming drastically to the end of the show, which is a shame. But we do have one feature left before we go, which is one of my favourites. And it's time to see who's going to get hung up, their portrait, not them personally. Which portrait is going to be hung up in the Corridor of Fame?
Have you ever been limited by who you were before?
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing.
Yeah? Sarah Jane?
Do I have the right?
For some people, small, beautiful events is what life is all about.
In the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really
Every great decision creates ripples. Like a huge boulder dropped in a lake.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could no more.
I'm not just the time. I'm the last of the time. It just disappears, doesn't it? Everything you are gone in a moment, like breath on a mirror.
I do what I do because it's right. Because it's decent. And above all, it's kind.
Love abides in the face of everything.
So, again, for any new listeners, the Corridor of Fame is a selection of people, heroes of Doctor Who, and also unsung heroes of Doctor Who, that are submitted by my wonderful guests, just to get a bit of praise and to be part of this wonderful Hall of Fame that we've created, this wonderful corridor. So, James, who would you like to submit to the Corridor of Fame?
It is, I didn't even have to think about this, it is going to be Tegan Javanka, or specifically Janet Fielding's portrayal of Tegan Javanka, because
Wonderful.
she is I love the character. I love how she plays the character. And I would have said this even before they brought her back for the previous series, which I was so happy about. I was delighted, and she's still got it. She's still got that sass. I love her to bits, and I love that she got to have that moment with the Fifth Doctor. It was so nice. But yeah, just partly because she's such a great character, and it was one of the first times that I can remember where and Sarah Jane had this to an extent as well, but it was one of the first times I remember a character being on the show who didn't particularly want to be there. And not in a bad way, and some people I think did complain about it, but it always made sense to me that there would be someone who would be there just going, what the hell is going? This is ridiculous. What are you doing? This is crazy. Just take me home. This is awful. This is really scary, and you don't know what you're doing, and you're all mad, and everyone's trying to kill us, and nothing works, and I don't think you know even how to fly this thing. It was just such a fun sort of breath of fresh air, and she wasn't always like that, obviously, but it was just. It just really feels like that's a kind of a strong tie to the new modern era, in that you have slightly more kind of down to earth characters who comment on the show, on the stories, and hold the Doctor to account. I mean, you could argue she was sort of a template for Donna. I love Donna. I mean, Donna is. I could write for Donna all day long. She's just the most fun to write for, but if I had a chance, I would absolutely love to write for Tegan, because she's just so much fun, and there's a direct through line from her to the present day, and right through Donna, and right through that kind of I mean, even and Rose, and Martha, all the modern companions, in that they hold the Doctor to account, and they don't fall for the flannel that the Doctor spins. And I always loved that. I always just found that really fun and refreshing. And in the back of my mind, I always kind of thought, I identified with Adric because he was sort of a swotty little nerd, and I was a swotty little nerd, and I was like, oh, maybe I could be on maybe I could go and travel with the Doctor, because I'm a swotty little nerd as well, and I'm a bit too clever for my own good. So I kind of identified with him, but I identified with Tegan as well later, because I just thought, yeah, she's right. This is ridiculous. This is really dangerous. This is a stupid plan. What does everyone think they're doing? Is nobody else seeing this? It's just it always just really tickled me, and I love her performance. I went to a convention a few years back that she organised, and I was just so excited to meet her. I was so impressed, and she's just got that kind of sort of sass in real life, just that kind of like ballsy, take no prisoners.
I was going to say she's great at conventions. She's great form on Twitter as well.
She's so cool.
And there's another thing that it would be remiss of me to mention would be from these sets here, her on behind the sofa on these collection sets where she's reacting to classic Doctor Who episodes is some of the funniest content related to Doctor Who I've ever seen. She's hilarious on those. I love Janet Fielding, and like you said, it was lovely to see her back in the show, and I think they really handled it perfectly. And the minute, like you said, the minute you see her on screen, that's Tegan in an instant. And that scene that she got with Peter was marvelous as well. So I mean, a great addition, and she's in here along with Sarah Sutton. So now we're just missing a Matthew Waterhouse to get the full set, to get the full companion set for the Fifth Doctor. So hopefully, someone will put Matthew in at some point.
I would have picked Adric if Tegan had already been in there. Purely because I really identified with him as a kid watching the show. He was like me on screen, which probably tells you a lot about me as a kid. But I just really identified with him.
I love Adric. I love Adric.
It was only years later, and people were like, "Oh, everyone hated it," and I was like, "No, they didn't. He was amazing. I remember being heartbroken at the end of Earthshock when the silent credits are going up and it's just his broken badge. And I was heartbroken because I really sort of felt for him, and I really felt like he was me on screen, and he'd done the ultimate sacrifice. And justice for Adric. My God, yeah, someone pick him next.
Hashtag justice for Adric should be trending on Twitter. Well, thank you for submitting, Janet. It's a wonderful pick to go in the corridor of fame, and that brings us to the end of the show. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for hours. I mean, we didn't even get on to the fact that you've made some recent returns to the Doctor Who world, and how have you been finding that recently?
Have I?
Yes, sadly I haven't had the chance to listen to it yet because I have a big Finnish backlog of things that I need to buy, and
there's a lot of stuff.
There is a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff, but I can't wait to listen to it. But what was it like to delve into that and writing for the Eighth Doctor as well?
Oh, just bonkers. I mean, because he's the Eighth Doctor, so that's amazing and that's legendary. But also he's Paul McGann, and I'm a huge Paul McGann fan. I got to sit in on the recording for the first half of it and have a sort of say a quick hello. And it's only my iron self-control that I didn't just badger him with questions about Withnail and I, because he's just so funny, and he's so great in this.
Effortlessly cool as well, and that voice. I mean, writing with that voice in mind is always going to be fun. I imagine
he's so handsome. But then when you're I didn't get to go to the studio, but I was listening in, so you don't see anything, but I could just hear the voice. And I was just like, God, even his voice is handsome. What the hell is his voice is good looking?
When I interviewed him at Comic-Con, and I got lost in those eyes.
Man,
what a dreamy man! What a dreamy man!
He absolutely is dreamy, but he's lovely as well. And just really funny and down to earth, and slags himself off if he gets something wrong, and he's just really not like he's not, he's not what you would think. Not that you would think he's not nice, but you never know with people, do you? But he was he's just so friendly and helpful and supportive, and you never feel like, oh, he's Paul McGann, this is his thing. It's just like he's one of the actors. He's one of the jobbing actors, and he's there to support everyone. And he's just, I can't say enough good things. And they're all great in that set. It was great fun to write for it because I'd heard them all on different things, and I'd seen Emma on the mini episode, so I knew they could handle a certain kind of. I like to do a lot of like really fast kind of bantery. Banter's a bad word these days. Bantery dialogue with sort of sarcasm and deadpan stuff. Yeah. And I knew, like with Gareth David Lloyd, unhandsome Gareth David Lloyd, I knew that they could really handle it. So I just threw the kitchen sink at them. And I hit them in the head a few times with it, but they really handled it because they're just great.
I can't wait to listen to it. That's the Time War Cass box set, I believe it's called, isn't it? Yes. I've done
other stuff that's not been announced. That will be.
That's exciting. So you really are diving back into Doctor Who a lot recently.
Can't keep me away.
That's great.
Cannot keep me away.
Good. Well, we're all going to be very excited to hear more. I do have one final question before we go. It's a very quick one, but it's a tough one. And I always say in a sentence. But obviously, if you need a bit longer, I'll let it slide. In a sentence, what does Doctor Who mean to you?
It's what it's always meant ever since I was a kid. Life is scary and difficult, and there are a lot of bullies out there, and a lot of hard things to deal with. But the Doctor is your friend, and will come and look after you, and will take care of the bullies. Because there are a lot of bullies out there, but there is always a bigger bully, and one day a bully will face a bigger bully who will punch that bully in the nose, and that's the Doctor. Doctor will just come and not just defeat the bullies or the villains. The Doctor will embarrass them and make fun of them, and that's even worse. And the Doctor's on your side, always on your side.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful answer. And it's been wonderful chatting to you as well. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I'll give you a brief moment to plug plug whatever you want to plug. Where can people find you? What are you working on next? Where do you want to direct people?
I'm currently on Twitter at James Moran for as long as the steam engines running Twitter keep running. I'm also I grab every time there's a new social media thing. I grab an account, so I'm on Mastodon, on Counter Social, and all the other ones that I'm on there somewhere. I've got a website, jamesmoran.com, which will have all my sort of updated links and credits. There's loads of free stuff on the website. That all my Doctor Who and Torchwood short stories are on there now for free that I've done in the Doctor Who storybook and the Torchwood magazine.
Lovely. I'll put a link down below to those, and I'll put a link to all of your socials as well. So
I got permission to put them up there along with the short stories that I did. So they're online. Just jamesmoran.com is going to have all my links.
Wonderful.
Fires of Pompeii Target book is still available.
It's a wonderful read. It is a wonderful read for anyone who wants it.
On sale. It was good fun. Eventually, it was a bit scary at first because I thought, it's not like a full. It's not like a big book. It's and the story's already worked out. So this will be easy, and it is not. I really admire authors who write prose and write books for a living, because having the script and the story already worked out, and the books are only about 35,000 words, and I still struggled to begin with. So I really respect people who can do that, because that is not my world. I'm a script boy.
Yeah. Well, you did a fantastic job. It's a great read. I would recommend it to anyone.
Box set, and
yes,
I've got all my things around the Torchwood Serenity. Audio is still available. That was good fun, and I've got more audio stuff coming down the pipe.
Wonderful. Well, we're all going to be very, very, very excited to hear it. And as well, thank you to everybody for listening. You've been listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Who Knew Podcast, on Instagram whoknewdwpod. You can email us, whoknewdwpod@gmail.com. I'm rusty at this, apologies. And Who Knew Podcast on TikTok as well. Get in touch. You can ask questions whenever we do a guest announcement. You've always got the opportunity to join in with bloody Twitter. So get yourselves following there so you don't miss anything. You can also support the podcast for as little as £1 a month, and you can get early access to podcasts, all on Patreon. So you can sort of help us out and help me keep the mic on, so that I can keep interviewing wonderful guests, and giving them massive bribes to come on. Your check will be there soon, James. And other than that, like I said, we've got some wonderful guests coming up. I don't know exactly who's coming next yet, so I can't tease it, but rest assured, there's going to be people coming on the podcast. So a lot to come, and you can listen to it. Forgot that bit. You can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube, where you can get full video versions. So please like, share, subscribe, give us a rating of 5 out of 5 if you liked it. And yeah, that's about it. So James, thank you once again for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, and thank you to everybody at home for listening, and I'll see you next week. Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast, is brought to you by the Who Knew Patreon. Massive thank you to our patrons, and a special thank you to Cal King. Thanks for listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. You can find us wherever you get your pods, as well as full video versions on YouTube. Please subscribe, like, share, leave us a review wherever you can, because it really helps us out. And a massive thank you to the Sononauts for lending us their cover of the Doctor Who theme tune to be the theme for the podcast.